and principal of energy consultancy Brookshire Advisory Research, who also teaches finance at the University of Notre Dame. Thank you this morning. I want to actually take a step back. We're all sort of hyperventilating about this incredible collapse in the price of oil. But my question for you is, why did nobody see it coming? Because everybody blames it sort of on the supply side story, which has not just suddenly popped up, which has been happening for years. And also the demand side of it we saw coming too.
Yes, you're absolutely right. The demand side of the picture has been very weak, and it's going to continue to be weak. So as you've just been speaking about on this morning's program, Russia's going into a 2-year recession. Europe is still very weak. Emerging markets such as Brazil is also very weak. Japan's in recession. So the demand picture for crude oil going forward into 2015 is going to continue to be very lackluster at best, with the supply picture continuing to grow.
Gianna, about twice a week you hear an announcement from a minister of one of the low-cost OPEC producers saying something like, we're just going to keep pumping forever, we're not really worried about it, we've got lots of capacity, we're fine. When you hear those announcements, do you hear desperation or a plan?
I hear a little bit of both, if you will. Their cost structure is considerably lower than many other producers around the globe. So if you look at OPEC producers, their production, they can produce at $20 per barrel, maybe $15 per barrel. But I do think that in the last day or so, when you've been seeing many of the OPEC countries coming out with their budgets for 2015, they're now being built around $60 to $70 per barrel crude oil prices. Yesterday, I saw the Saudis came out with a crude oil prediction of about $80 per barrel for their 2015 budget. My assessment is that is a little optimistic. So I don't see crude oil prices bouncing back into that $80 per barrel range anytime soon. We may be looking at going into 2016 and well into 2016 before we see any kind of rebound into the crude oil markets.
Gianna, in the near term, how much more downside do you think there is?
Well, I definitely think that there's propensity for crude oil prices to break, certainly for WTI, to break the $50 per barrel mark. When you look at production, production is continuing to grow. I don't see that abating just yet. Certainly smaller and mid-cap producers are going to be sidelined in the current environment. Many of them are re-examining and sharpening their pencils on their 2015 capital expenditure budgets. But I wouldn't see prices going back until for the next 18 months. I continue to see a very weak crude oil price environment. I do think that breaking $50 per barrel on WTI is certainly plausible.
And the smaller producers aren't just sharpening their pencils on CapEx expenditures, they're also looking over their shoulders at who might want to acquire them in the next year.
Yes, absolutely. I do think that in the current environment is certainly very ripe for consolidation. So if we look at, anytime we have these downturns in commodity markets, particularly in the crude oil markets, these small cap and mid cap producers, this is the perfect environment for many of them to consolidate, to gain efficiencies, reduce their cost structures. Absolutely, consolidation is in the cards.
We hear a lot of talk of 1986. What's the right historical parallel for what's going on right now?
Well, if you look, we can look back at a couple of parallels. First, in 1998 was the last downturn in the crude oil markets that we had. So in 1998, prices got down to $30, $40 per barrel. There is precedent for OPEC to cut production. In 2008, they did cut production when crude oil prices plummeted into the $30 to $40 per barrel range. Before that, prior to that, then you'd have to go back to about 1998, where you'd see crude oil prices went down into about $10 per barrel. And that's where you saw many of the majors come together. ExxonMobil became Exxon and Mobil merged at that time. BP and Amoco Oil and Arco Oil all merged around that period of time. So you can look back into history for a few other downturns in the market, but I do think consolidation is plausible.
what kind of consolidation? Is it going to be more of those mega mergers? You mentioned ExxonMobil, obviously. I'm thinking also of ConocoPhillips. Or do you think it's going to be more of those big players coming in and sort of buying up the smaller U.S. producers across the Bakken who are trying to figure out how they can stay afloat?
I think it's going to be primarily amongst some small cap and mid cap names. So I don't foresee many of the large majors, but I do see small and mid cap majors being, certainly being targets for consolidation, consolidating amongst themselves, or being acquired by larger players in the marketplace.
Gianna, over the 100-year history of the oil industry, cartels figure out a way to form. What do you see anywhere the makings of a new cartel?
I don't. I think what we see now are prices, the markets really playing themselves out. And I think that's what the role that we saw Saudis relinquish over the Thanksgiving holiday when they had their last meeting, and they essentially are totally ineffective as a cartel. So I don't think cartels are going to exist in the marketplace as we have seen it historically. The OPEC operating as a cartel has become completely ineffective by them relinquishing their role as the swing producer in the market. Historically, they've always played that role. They've been the only one that can increase and decrease production in the marketplace. But now they've got competition. They've got competition from North American players, the U.S., Canada. If you look at U.S.'s production, U.S.'s crude oil production is right about 9.1 million barrels per day. Well, guess what, right? The Saudis are producing 10 million barrels per day. So who would have ever have thought that could have happened? But, that's what I've been saying. We're in a whole new world order in the energy markets.
Gianna, thank you. Gianna Bern there of Brookshire Advisory on the irrelevancy of OPEC.